Hi, my name is Vanessa Lech, and today's video slash podcast, airing live right now on LinkedIn and YouTube, is going to be about several topics. The Office of Inspector General OIG update, the complaint that I filed regarding the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, as well as the Congressional rep that assisted me, which was Mike Johnson, and his office staff specifically. They were amazing as usual. And also going to cover future topics that I plan to talk about, like the Deborah Sampson law, which I've already done a video slash podcast on that. So check that out on my YouTube channel where you can subscribe. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Or you can also, if you love podcasts, my podcast, Hello Vanessa Media, is everywhere podcasts are. So just check that out if that's of interest to you. All right. And then also I plan to do another tutorial. I now have a tutorial playlist on my YouTube channel about, you name it, many different things. But the next one I'm going to do is about how I successfully amended, aka updated my medical record of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. And there's a regulation, super boring, I'm sure, about that I'm going to be covering too in that video. I don't know what date I'm going to do that. So also, if you want to get updates and follow me around, you can go to hellovanessamedia.com/info. One of these days, if I get enough people on my little email list sign up, at some point, I'm going to send out a newsletter about updates. So if that's of interest to you, check it out. Okay. All right. So I'm going to get on with today's video. So I guess I'll talk about the burn pits. They're very active. I'm on Google Alerts right now, getting alerted about all the news updates about the burn pits. And for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, I'll just give you a quick update. If you're following along, you already know. But basically, a burn pit was a pit dug in the ground in the Middle East in different parts. They still exist, a number of them. But specifically for many years now in the past, there were burn pits that were dug into the ground where all kinds of things were thrown into them, such as trash of all kinds, anything. I mean, just things you don't want to know about, as well as chemicals, as well as batteries, as well as all kinds of things that normally would not be burned here in America, but were over in the Middle East, is my understanding. I've read a lot of articles about this, news articles now. There's a ton of news articles coming out. There's legislation of all different kinds being introduced to possibly, to be voted on one way or the other in Congress right now. It's definitely a hot issue. And our current president, Biden, his son passed away tragically of a terminal illness that was quite rare. And he believes that it was due to these burn pits. And he has mentioned that as well. So it's a very hot topic. There was a book written about this, about burn pits. I think it was something like poisoning of American soldiers or something like that, burn pits. If you Google it, you'll find it. It's only one book that I know of that's about that, to the best of my knowledge. Could be wrong. There's also a documentary that was done back in 2016 about this. I have not watched the documentary. It looks way too heavy, honestly, for me to be able to watch that and get through successfully. But I read the synopsis and the details of it, and it's extremely heavy documentary, to say the least. So anyway, so this is a hot topic. Jon Stewart, the comedian, as some of you may know, he is such an amazing human being. I've got to give it to the man. I mean, he's a huge advocate of first responders and the military veterans and military community members and of their plight and their illnesses and stuff. And so he's historically been advocating for legislation to help people receive healthcare in those communities that have been adversely affected by various things. Basically, it's a long story. So he was at a veteran service organization recently. Within the last week, I think there was news articles that came out about it that I was reading, where he was advocating basically for legislation to help, these affected military veterans receive health care for their needs, essentially. So that's a whole nother thing. So moving on. So if you've been following along, you may already know. And if you don't, then I'll tell you now. Basically, I have like a Veterans Affairs playlist saga literally on YouTube. And there's a whole backstory in that I'm not even going to try to cover, especially if, God forbid, you've been watching these videos, listening to this podcast. I'm just going to skip that. But if you're not up on this, you can go to my YouTube channel. I've got a playlist, multiple playlists, but the one that's most comprehensive is going to be the Veterans Affairs Saga playlist, literally. So you can check that out if you're not up on this. So I'm just going to jump right into my points here. All right. So with regard to the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs Office of Inspector General OIG complaint that I filed, within just the last couple of weeks, I think it was, I already have a response more so than what I was expecting. I didn't think I'd ever hear back, to be completely frank with you. And then I also piggybacked on that and had already contacted my congressional rep, Mike Johnson's office here where I'm at, Louisiana. I'm visiting right now, not going to be here forever. The weather's really rough in Louisiana, by the way. Like right now, there's like a tornado warning where I'm at. It's like pouring outside. Lightning, thunder, flash flood watch. I mean, it's wild in Louisiana with this weather. Last year, there was like 2 hurricanes, 2 tornadoes in my area, had to evacuate. It was so much drama. Anyway, so the weather in Louisiana is super intense in my opinion. All right. I grew up in Florida and I don't recall the weather being this bad growing up. Anyhow, it's a whole nother story. But yeah, so Mike Johnson's office, congressional rep, his office staff is amazing. Filed a little inquiry/complaint about some things at the VA. It was literally a long list, but the main thing was it hit my radar. If you watch my other videos, listen to my other podcasts, you'll know this about the VA saga, that a medical referral was denied. It was an illegal denial, okay? That was not supposed to happen. And this is like a real hot topic for me, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and their management, because of the fact that I have a storied history with it, which if you watch my saga, listen to my saga, you already know. Basically, ever since I got in the military, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs has been the bane of my existence and my nemesis, okay? It's just a fact. And I really withheld from saying things like that for years and years and years because I'm an optimistic, hopeful, forward-looking person historically. You know, I really try to maintain that. But, you know, the truth is the truth. And so, you know, I used to work for the organization many years ago. It was a total freaking nightmare. Some things you just can't forget in life. That's one of them for me. And I also just have had countless interactions with the organization, and many of them have been negative. And I have a very low opinion of most of the higher echelon management inside the organization, because in my experience, the higher echelon management are nothing but a problem. They create the problems. They retain these higher level executives and managers for decades, and they get bonus money and big salaries and healthcare benefits and retirement benefits off the taxpayers' backs. And in the meantime, they don't provide the support needed in many cases to these subordinate employees, especially these healthcare workers, who in many cases are working for not as much money as you might expect them to, and are working very hard. And there's a big turnover. And I believe the recruitment and retention issues of quality employees inside the VA is directly due to bad management. Period. We have a civil service system that's outdated. It's nothing but a problem. And I believe that at-will employment needs to be implemented, because we have way too much taxpayer-funded shamming going on inside the federal government with regards to the civil service system, specifically U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, specifically all this management executive stuff that I'm complaining about. And there's things which I've covered in other videos, but I'll mention here, like Merit System Protection Board, like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission federal track, like the Office of Special Counsel. It's just a huge waste of cash, in my opinion, and highly ineffective, and don't help most people who need it, specifically Veterans Affairs whistleblowers, okay? And I know because I used to be one of them. All right, so moving on. So I'm just going to read the highlights of the letter that I received from the Veterans Affairs Office of Inspector General today, which came through Mike Johnson, Congressional Rep's office staff, and there was emailed to me. I'm not going to read the whole thing. It's not necessary. Just going to hit the highlights. Okay. All right, so they're responding to my complaint, like I just mentioned, and they're just basically letting the office know that they received my inquiry/complaint through the Congressional Rep's office, as well as directly through them. I did a video on how to file a complaint with the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs Office of Inspector General, OIG, and I walked you all through that. That's one of my, I think I did that. I think that might be in my tutorial playlist, actually. Can't quite remember, on my YouTube channel. I'm not sure. But whatever the case, I did that. So then it says that the hotline complaint was sent for review to the Office of Inspector General. And let me go ahead and put a little banner up if you guys are watching this, so you guys can see. Okay, OIG. Clinical, let me see, Office of Inspector General, Office of Healthcare inspections, OHI. I don't even have a banner for that because I didn't know that acronym existed until today. Clinical. Okay, so let me go repeat this again. So many acronyms. The hotline complaint was sent for review to the Office of Inspector General, OIG, Office of Healthcare Inspections, OHI, clinical staff comprised of physicians, nurses, and other clinicians. The OHI, which is the Office of Healthcare Inspections team, OHI, performed a preliminary review of the information provided as well as the available medical records. Like, oh, okay, they're doing their homework. That's nice to see. The OHI, which is the Office of Healthcare Inspections, noted that while my medical referral was initially denied, it was approved on appeal. Okay, so I'm just going to stop right there. So the first thing I want to point out is that there was no appeal because, to the best of my knowledge, no one informed me of any type of appeal process whatsoever with a denied medical referral inside the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, where I was trying to get outside the VA to get some healthcare because I did not trust this specific department inside the VA based upon my experiences and observations and research thus far. Okay, and this is specifically referring to the Alexandria, Louisiana Veterans Affairs Medical Center and certain management, certain department there, which I will leave unnamed. Okay, so it's a specific region, not the entire nation, a specific region that I had dealings with. And at some point, because, I've just dedicated myself to raising awareness about these issues, because frequently what's happening is that people are only talking about the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs when something really tragic has happened, such as, including but not limited to, terminal illness of military veterans not receiving the help that they need. Okay. That is a common thing that comes up. Or if there's like a serial killer and stuff. Yeah, you heard that right. Google it if you don't know what I'm talking about. Or these other really extreme situations involving whistleblowers. Okay. That's typically where people start talking publicly about these issues. But what they don't talk about, and this is a problem that needs to be addressed, and this is where I'm addressing it myself, are the daily struggles of military veterans and military community members and the issues within the VA. And that is what I am dedicated to pointing out, are these kinds of daily struggles. All right, so it says here that approved on appeal, this medical referral of mine. No, it wasn't. That's actually not correct. There was no appeal process. No one told me about an appeal process. Quite frankly, I don't want there to be an appeal process because that's just one more way they can start shamming inside the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, their management. I'm sure of it, okay? Because they're super great at working these bureaucratic systems for their benefit, in my experience. The reason my medical referral was reversed, the denial, was because of me. Because I successfully advocated for myself for change. Okay. That's what I did. I did that. I raised hell. I made sure that I was not going to be ignored and stomped on and blown away by some bad VA manager, which was a chief of this department, which is exactly what this person was doing. And I doubt I'm the only one. I just think that this time they disapproved the wrong person, period. That's what happened. And so my little complaint initially was about my situation and everyone else's potentially too, because I want to know how many more other people are experiencing this. But I use the situation to raise awareness to the best of my ability, like I'm doing right here, right now, to advocate for change and to make sure that people know that this kind of stuff is happening. Because according to the VA Mission Act of 2018, there's a provision I already outlined in my other video. You can check that out. I'm not going to put it here. They're supposed to, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, people are supposed to be allowed, veterans, eligible veterans, okay, I'm one of them, to be able to choose where they get their health care and go outside the VA if it's in their best interest. All right, that's a pretty low bar to meet, essentially, in my opinion. Again, I'm not a lawyer, never been to law school, but I'd love to go. So that was the issue. So there was never an appeal process. It just got reversed immediately because management realized at the Alexandria, Louisiana Veterans Affairs Medical Center that, this veteran is not going to go away. Like, we need to reverse that decision pronto. And that's what they did. But another thing I'd like to point out too, before I move on to the rest of this letter sent to me by the Office of Inspector General and through the OIG to the Congressional rep to me, is that I have noticed since I've been visiting Louisiana that the Alexandria, Louisiana Veterans Affairs Medical Center, and I'm talking about the big VA, not the little C box off of it, but the big VA, where their management sits over there, some of them collecting their government funded paychecks, their benefits. I've noticed that they will start dodging you. This has been my experience if they think you're inconvenient and they don't want to deal with you. Look, I don't want to talk to these managers anymore. I've got nothing left to say to them. If they want to see what I have to say, they can subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow my podcast. But with that said, it is totally unprofessional, some of the behavior I've seen from some of these managers at the Alexandria, Louisiana Veterans Affairs Medical Center and their choice to blow me off and not do their due diligence and follow up with me. They could have done it through a secure message through the healthcare system. They know I use the email. They have my email on file. They had my permission to email me explicitly, informed consent I gave, and they chose not to follow up with me. And if they're doing this to me, someone that's perfectly capable of advocating successfully for themselves and effectively, then I would like to know how many other veterans they're doing this to. And that right there makes me angry, okay? Because there is a lack of justice and accountability at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and their management. And this I know for sure. I know it from dealing with this organization for approximately, let me think, how long has it been? Almost 10 years. Almost 10 years since I got out of the military. And I know it from working at the VA, that there's a lack of justice and a lack of accountability. And so that in of itself is a problem. Okay, moving on. So they said, the Office of Inspector General, we understand Miss Lech, that's me, Vanessa, Miss Lech's concerns and hopes that other veterans will not have to go through the same process. And we continually collect and analyze the complaints we receive for trends that may be worthy of further review. We will take Miss Lech's experience into account if there are trends that suggest further work by the OIG, Office of Inspector General, in this area is warranted. So the commentary I have on that, and there's nothing that like me, like trying to communicate this information, what I'm telling you right now, the whole world isn't going to be really meaningfully considered, in my opinion, if I shoot back this information to the OIG, because I already wrote a letter that was very detailed and my position is clear, which is why they responded like this. And it's not going to be considered by VA management because my experience of the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs is it's one where it's very well insulated from any form of accountability and justice in most cases. And also the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs does not accept, with being such a large organization that's taxpayer funded, doesn't accept any meaningful constructive criticism whatsoever. They pretty much just blow everything off and shove it underneath the rug. And if you're a veteran, my experience has been that they're going to quickly try to distract you, redirect you, refocus you, and not hear you. And I'm not talking about the lower level staff, okay? And when I say lower level, I mean subordinate staff, because the reason I say that is because U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs has a very rigid hierarchies type system, and it's very pronounced. That's a big problem with their system as well. So the management at the higher levels aren't going to listen. That has been my direct experience. So with this whole thing of, we're going to analyze and collect and data and see the trends, the reality is that you're going to have a large volume of veterans complain in the way that I did in order to notice a trend. And once that has happened, you're going to be faced with a supersized problem that is so out of control. Who knows how it will get handled or if it will be reined in at all. Because some of these veterans, I'm not going to say many, I'm going to say some because I don't know the numbers. For sure, some are not going to be able to, you have the energy to aggressively advocate for themselves and are not always going to have someone available to do that for them, like a caregiver, for example. And so it is an unrealistic and unreasonable expectation to expect veterans to go complaining to the Office of Inspector General, OIG, every time this type of thing happens, where a medical referral is denied or they have some kind of problem or their needs aren't being met. It's unrealistic and unreasonable expectation. And in fact, I believe that many, or at least some of these veterans, are instead going to give up and go away in frustration. It's so easy to do that. Honestly, if it weren't for the fact that I have such a storied history with this organization, I too would probably have given up and gone away once my medical referral was denied and my needs were not being met, because it's so much easier. But because I have such a history with this organization and become so dedicated to raising awareness about it, I decided, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use this experience to raise awareness and step on this platform to make sure people know what's really going on at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs with their management. Okay. Part of my complaint had to do with the Deborah Sampson Act. If you're following along with my videos and podcasts, you already know my grievances about this. So the Alexandria, Louisiana Veterans Affairs Medical Center, in my direct experience with my direct conversation with one of their chiefs, are not adhering to all the provisions of as outlined by the Deborah Sampson Act recently passed into law. And so the OIG, the Office of the Inspector General, said in their letter, we would note that the Deborah Sampson Act was signed into law on January 6, 2021. Okay. And may take VHA, which is Veterans Health Administration, some time to implement. Okay. Well, when a law is a law, people are expected to follow it. And so it doesn't matter if it's January 6th, we're now into April, that law needs to be followed. And this is a problem where there's too much latitude within the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs management to be able to do what they want to do, when they want to do it, and how they want to do it. And so then the OIG proceeds to basically give the VA management, in my opinion, too much latitude and to basically make excuses for them for various reasons, including noting that, the pandemic, including noting that they'll monitor the VHA's, Veterans Health Administration's progress in meeting the intent of the law in a reasonable manner and time frame is what it says here. However, I would just like to say that I think that the VA management have too much latitude as it is to do what they want, essentially. And that's been my experience. It's been my observations. And it's been like that at multiple facilities I've observed. So, one of the things that I can't stand that the VA does, as I've noted, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs is a propaganda machine, is that they will go and create commercials, which I disagree with them being allowed to even do this with their budget, which is bloated and I think probably could be cut without harming veterans. We could just lay off some of these executives and managers and cut some of the fat, because the VA, in my opinion, is a very top-heavy organization. And Google, you can find all about mismanagement of the VA and how they've wasted so much money constructing facilities because of mismanagement, okay, and misuse of funds. And so, this whole thing about giving them all this time to meet their requirements, I think, is ridiculous, because my dog food company, which is another reference I've made in the past, made tons of changes during COVID in order to adjust and adapt, as well as many other businesses, as well as I have. I've had to make those adjustments. Most people have. If my dog food company were as slow as the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, my dogs would have starved to death if I was relying upon them and only them for food. Just the other day, my dog food company got my order to me in like one day after I ordered it. That is amazing in and of itself. So my point here is that if a dog food company can manage to adapt to the times to get dog food to dogs, then U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs needs to adapt to the times to get veterans the services that they need and to do their job in management and to stop making excuses, okay? And that's how I see it. Now, it says that my letter basically was also sent to the Veterans Health Administration so that they could see it, but no response was required, which I don't really care, because any response would have been probably meaningless from the VHA. And then it just says that basically they've concluded this matter and it's wrapped up and whatever. So I'll be honest with you. I think that the response from the OIG, the Office of Inspector General, was actually very reasonable overall. And I think that they gave it a lot more consideration than what I even expected. And the reason I say that is because these governmental systems typically tend to be very ineffective in oversight, in my experience. And I actually think the Office of Inspector General, the OIG, is doing a much better job than other systems have done in my experience, like the EEOC, like the OSC, like the MSPB, all of those different things. And here are the acronyms. If you're watching the video, you can see that real quick. Okay. So anyways, so I will give props where props are due to the Office of Inspector General, OIG, in my situation. For one, their response was actually prompt, and I found the response to be meaningful and reasonable, even though it's not without criticism, because I definitely think that I don't know if more could be done, because I do believe, and this kind of goes back to giving them credit where credit's due, that they're so overburdened with grievances about the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, as well as anyone else that deals with the VA with oversight, that I'm surprised they found time to even respond at all, to be completely frank with you. But, you know, at the end of the day, I utilize my own healthcare experience to try to raise awareness about issues that I believe are affecting many veterans, and issues with VA management that I believe are likely widespread, at least in the region that I am in Louisiana. And that's what I chose to do. So, you know, I think that was a good thing. All right, moving on. So, future videos / podcasts I plan to do. I plan on doing one about the Deborah Sampson Act law that was recently passed. I just covered a little bit about briefly. I've already done a video / podcast on it, but I found it really interesting. I think it's a legal, like, law school website that lawyers, it looks like, I'm guessing, if I remember correctly, put together a really informational page of just highlights, almost like bullet points of the law. And I'm actually going to do like a little review of that, because I just thought that was really informative and helpful. Because as with any law that's passed by Congress, like, it's typically, these laws are enormous. I mean, there's so many pages. I have a video where I kind of scrolling through the pages and everything, kind of giving my thoughts on it just based upon my experiences as a female veteran, because the law is all about female veterans. But this one was even more filtered down to very specific points and elaborated on that, the lawyers did. So I'm going to do a video / podcast on that when I get to it. I may do a live one the way I'm doing this one right now, just because I find it easier these days. Okay, and then I'm also going to do one, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video / podcast, about how to modify, amend medical records at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs as a veteran, and how specifically I did it, and in my understanding of how it can possibly be done, because I did manage to do it. I have to check my medical record and make sure it was updated inside the system, but it was communicated that it was updated. And then also I'm going to show the form and stuff that I used to get that done, and kind of walk everyone through how I did that, because this is definitely not something that's advertised, as well as anything that I'm talking about, by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. It's just not a priority for them, go figure. And also, there's just lack of communication from the management, in my experience at the Alexandria, Louisiana Veterans Affairs Medical Center, where, you know, I was actually trying to follow up and ask some different questions. And of course, I was just blown off by their management. That's what they do. That's what they do in my experience. My direct personal experience as a veteran is that they ignore you if you're inconvenient for them, instead of following up like a professional person would and should. Okay. And I just bring that up because this has been a trend I've seen over the last almost 10 years of dealing with U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. It's not just this one time in Louisiana at the Alexandria, Louisiana Veterans Affairs Medical Center with their management. And no, it's not. And I'm not talking about any clinic, okay, because I go to a clinic, that's great. I'm talking about the big VA located, I think it's Pineville, Louisiana, to be specific. They call it the Alex VA, though. But I've noticed it's a trend inside the VA, whether I was an employee or whether I was a veteran interacting with the VA, to where they just choose to ignore anyone that's inconvenient for them. And they just kind of hope you go away. And typically that works really well with the VA. It really works well for the managers at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs to ignore inconvenient people, whether they be a military veteran or a whistleblowing employee or whatever. Many of these managers, the ones in the higher echelon, my direct experience has been, my direct observations have been, they just don't care, period. That's it. They don't care. They care about themselves. They care about their benefits. They care about their paychecks. They don't care about veterans. They don't care about the military community. All right. That's been my direct experience in many cases. So that basically wraps it up for today. I wish you all the best. And also subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like if you like the video, if you like podcasts, I have a podcast, Hello Vanessa Media. It's available everywhere you can possibly find a podcast. Well, I'm going hard and heavy with military community related topics, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs these days. I also cover addiction, anger management, domestic violence, and other topics related to whatever the case may be interested in. I also cover social type stuff, pop culture type stuff from time to time. So yeah. So if you're interested, then check it out. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can follow me there. I wish you all the best. Bye.